So I mentioned this before, but for a while I was huge into Mumford & Sons. I first got into them in high school. I bought a CD of Babel and played it driving home at least twice a week. I know a lot of people consider them stomp clap hey, and yeah, their early shit definitely has some stomp clap hey-isms, but I think out of all the bands that came out during that indie folk boom of the late 2000s, they're definitely the least guilty of being campy and cringe. Their music has more of a rock sound compared to other bands they're lumped with. They got faster tempos, it's more aggressive, well, more aggressive compared to Lumineers. To me, it was cool hearing hooks you'd expect from an electric guitar, but on horns or the banjo. Look, I didn't say they were perfect. They still got some stomp clap hey-isms. Like, look at these outfits, come on. But I feel out of all these bands, Mumford & Sons is the one that felt the most their own. And I bring all this up because back in March, they released their first album in 7 years, Rushmere. This was on my listen list for months, until eventually I forgot about it completely. Because honestly, over the past 2 years, I've listened to Mumford & Sons way less. I still got my favorites on playlists, but until now, I honest to God can't remember the last time I listened to any of these front to back. Then last week, Spotify recommended Rushmere to me, and I said, alright, fine, I'll finally listen to it. Sorry it took so long. So I listened to it, and I didn't like it at all, to be honest. Okay, I liked maybe 2 songs, but goddamn, it felt so underbaked. I'll get more into it later, but it genuinely made me question my enjoyment for their other albums. So I want to see if Rushmere's just bad on its own, or maybe there's a reason I cut back on Mumford & Sons so much. So before we talk about this album, let's talk about these albums.
But it was not your fault but mine, and it was your heart on the...
First, we got Sigh No More from 2009, and despite having 2 of their biggest songs, this is the one I listened to the least out of their original 4 albums. Like I said, my intro to them was Babel, which I think that album does everything Sigh No More does, but better. So by the time I finally listened to this, it just sounded like Diet Coke Babel to me. Which I know that isn't a fair criticism since I was working backwards, but 90% of the time, a band's debut is their best release, so, you know, what's their excuse? So like I said in the intro, while I don't consider Mumford & Sons full-on stomp clap hey, they definitely have some stomp clap hey-isms, especially on this album. For starters, it's way too dramatic. They're trying to make every part sound more powerful and grandiose than it needs to be. White Blank Page is a very fuck-off type of song vocally. The lyrics try way too hard to be triumphant and vengeful, and the vocal harmonies at the end are goofy as hell. I Gave You All has this problem, but instrumentally. The song builds into crescendos, but they all sound the exact same to me. It honestly sounds like a worse version of Broken Crown to me. In fact, that's a criticism I got with a lot of their songs instrumentally. So many of them have the exact same section where the vocals cut out, they're beating the shit out of the kick drum on a 4 count, and the banjo's noodling the exact same pattern over the rest of the band. I'm no banjo player, so maybe my ears aren't trained enough to pick up on the intricacies of it, but all these parts just sound the exact same to me. Like if you isolated the banjo tracks from most of these songs, I genuinely wouldn't be able to tell them apart. We'll talk more about the banjo as we go on, but early on, I don't think Mumford & Sons knew how to use it in an interesting way. Like it was interesting at first hearing an unconventional instrument like the banjo in a radio-topping song, but after that novelty wears off, you realize how underwhelming it ends up being. That's not to say all the songs are bad. Like I said earlier, Mumford & Sons has more elements of rock compared to other stomp clap hey bands at the time, and there's some great examples of that. I love how fast The Cave is and how it's one of the few songs to use electric guitar, or Dust Bowl Dance, which has a full drum kit and also has a pretty sick breakdown. The sad thing is, those exact same elements are also in songs I don't like. The up-tempo waltzy mandolin in Winter Wind sounds super corny, and the breakdown in Thistle and Weeds once again sounds too dramatic. I'm not shocked I disliked Sigh No More, but I'm shocked with how much I disliked it. Being real, I only like 2 of the 12 songs, either because they have instruments that go outside their established norm, or they're at a way slower tempo and forces the banjo to do something different. So yeah, not a great start. I know I can say, oh, I respect it for what it is, and the band wouldn't be where they are without it. And yeah, that's true, but I still don't like it, so let's move on.
'Cause I know my weakness, know my voice, and I'll believe in grace.
Next, we got the one I've mentioned 8 times already, Babel from 2012. Being the album that got me into Mumford & Sons, I was curious and kinda nervous to see how my opinions would change. I got a lot of good memories with this album. I listened to the title track when I broke my thumb snowboarding last year, and I'm sad to say I don't really like this one either. It's still better than Sigh No More. Like I said, Babel does everything that album does, but better. But it's not that much better, you feel me? A lot of these songs feel super bloated with these drawn out and annoyingly simple choruses like I Will Wait, and once again the banjo noodling, where it plays the exact same pattern over and over again, even when the rest of the song sounds unique. I feel this album is weirdly inconsistent with its layering. Sometimes it'll have cool ideas like the violin solo on Ghosts We Knew, and other times it can be underwhelming like the horns on Broken Crown. There's times too where it sounds like they should have added more but didn't. Both the title track and Not With Haste have the exact same parts during each of their choruses. You may not notice it the first couple listens, but it kills the momentum of these songs. But to the album's credit, there's still parts on here I like. But just like with Sigh No More, it's usually when they incorporate something that goes outside their normal sound. When they use an electric guitar on Whispers in the Dark and Below My Feet, or when they use a full drum kit on Lover of the Light. Honestly, I feel all these songs would be like 25% better if they used a full kit instead of just, again, beating the shit out of a kick drum. A lot of it feels super repetitive too. Like, I think Mumford & Sons honestly wrote themselves into a corner by sticking with the folk sound. And that's not a dig at folk music, but since they're going in more of a rock direction, there's a different set of expectations with that genre and style they can't meet by still being folky. It's also not just repetitive instrumentation. A lot of songs have very similar word choices in their lyrics. You could argue that's a stylistic choice or the songs have overlapping themes, but it feels a bit too broad for me. Like, take a shot every time you hear the words blind, light, or still. It's crazy these songs feel so long, because realistically they're not. Most of them are around the 4-minute mark. Which, if you think 4 minutes is a long song, go back on TikTok, your attention span is fried. But since a lot of these songs don't do much in that time, they feel way longer than they are. Once again, I want to put extra blame on the banjo for being so damn boring. I really think it should have been on just like 2 or 3 songs instead of all of them. But since they made it synonymous with the band, it just had to be on everything. Okay, yeah, wow. They should have treated it like how they treated the violin on Ghosts or the lap steel on their cover of The Boxer. It's an instrument that's used sparingly, but when it is used, it helps the song stand out in all the right ways. So yeah, to be honest, not a fan of Babel anymore. I still like about 4 of the songs, so at least that's like a quarter of it. But it's something I'll probably never listen to front to back again. Man, growing up sucks. We will stand down and go under of it. Next, we got what many consider their Jumping the Shark album, Wilder Mind from 2015. And that's because it completely ditches their folk sound from Sigh No More and Babel and goes way more in a rock direction. That means every song has electric guitar, full drums, and most of all, no banjo. If you could imagine, this album is pretty divisive among fans because of the stark change in sound, which to some degree I get. You know, you go from 2 albums that sound very much the same stylistically to one that's essentially the antithesis of that style. You could argue they should have eased fans more into this new sound by incorporating more of their old style like acoustic guitar, banjo, but thankfully Wilder Mind is severely lacking in stomp clap hayisms, and I think it's for the better. Like I said, Mumford & Sons always had elements of rock, but they never got to take full advantage of them because they also wanted to be a folk band. But now that they've fully embraced that rock sound, it fixes a lot of problems I had with their instrumentation. Every song has a full drum kit, there's way more layering, and there's solos and hooks instead of those damn banjo noodles. You know, most of the time they're pretty sparse or simple, but you know what? Sometimes that's what the song calls for. The best songs on here have a great dichotomy of being spacey and groovy. The drums and bass on Tompkins Square Park are super tight, and the second verse has a clacker part that I'm weirdly obsessed with. And the title track is probably my favorite song of theirs. It's so light and breezy.
It's in my blood, it's in my water. You tried to tame it.
The way they use guitar is really interesting. Since they're on electric now, they're able to do a lot more stuff since it's not just acoustic. And that's not a dig on acoustic guitar, but you objectively have more options on electric with effects. They'll use it for loud hooks like on the Wolf, but also for ambience and filling space like on Hot Gates or Believe. Again, these aren't the most insane hooks or solos, but they fill space very well. And that's what I like most about Wildermind. It has space.
No flame burns forever. Oh no.
But there's still some songs on here I don't like. The strings in the outro of Broad Shoulder Beast sound kind of forced. I don't think the tempo works with the time signature, and the guitars on Just Smoke are whatever. It sounds too poppy and upbeat for me. Not to mention those damn hand claps in the chorus. See, Wildermind does have some stomp clap hey-isms. To be honest, I can't really say as much about this one compared to Sigh No More and Babel. With those two, its problems are very blatant, but here it's more like they're mild annoyances. Which is both a good thing and a bad thing in my opinion, because it's like, it doesn't completely ruin the songs, but it doesn't give me much to talk about. Overall, I liked about half of the album. The other half isn't terrible, but I would only ever listen to it if I was playing Wildermind front to back, and even then I'd probably skip them too. Again, this album is a massive departure from their old sound, but there's some genuinely good stuff on here, so I'd recommend checking it out, especially if you hate the banjo. Finally, we got Delta from 2018, and despite Babel being my introduction, this album is what really got me into Mumford & Sons. Which is funny, because from what I understand, this one's just as contentious as Wildermind. Shit, it might be even more. Delta uses so many different styles, instruments, genres. It has elements from the last 3 albums, but they're completely recontextualized. For example, they brought the banjo back, and it's actually used in interesting ways. On 42, the banjo's way slower and has some crazy effects on it, or on Woman, which has 3 banjo parts layered over each other, and it's kinda groovy too. Again, I understand why old fans wouldn't like this, but in my humble opinion, Delta has the best instrumentation out of all their albums. Oh my god, it's not even close. Every song on here has so much nuance. They're constantly adding new layers, instruments. There's rarely ever a dull moment on any of these, and I feel that says a lot about Mumford & Sons as a band. This album alone is why I never fully consider them stomp clap hey. Like, you think the Lumineers would do this shit? Pfft, no. They did this to evolve the band even more, and they knew they could do it too. By the time this album came out, they already won Grammys, sold out stadiums, headlined festivals, so, why not go crazy, you know? However, while Delta fixes a lot of problems I had with the band, it also exacerbates another problem of theirs. This is by far their worst album lyrically. Like, oh my god, this shit is so repetitive. Remember how I brought up them overusing words like blind, light, and still on Babel? Well, it's even worse here. Almost all the songs sneak these words in one way, shape, or form. In fact, I put all the lyrics into a Google Doc and found still is used 5 times, blind is 6 times, and light is 16 times. From what I read early on, all the lyrics were written by Marcus Mumford, and even though Babel and Sigh No More can be repetitive, I think they also have a lot of great lines too. But by the time they got to Delta, everyone else helped with the lyrics as well. And I'm not gonna put the blame entirely on the other band members for the lyrics getting worse, but being honest, they do ruin some of the songs for me. Guiding Light, I love the instrumentation and the scarce singing in the verses, but the choruses are super repetitive and try way too hard to hook ya. October Sky, same thing. It kinda reminds me of Magnolia by J.J. Cale, but the lyrics are too bland, and I hate that extra chorus at the very end after the instruments cut out. The strings are really pretty on Forever, but they speedrun using all these annoying words in the first verse alone, and the biggest offender to all this, if I say. Again, love the instrumental, but literally half the lyrics are the title and the word love. Possibly the most overused word in all of lyricism. It's so embarrassingly bad, I'd legit skip this song anytime I play Delta in the car. It's a shame too, because I think tonally these guys are all good singers. Even on their hokiest, most stomp clap hey ass songs, I can at least appreciate the singing itself. And I can still do that on Delta for sure, but after re-listening to the album, it really opened my eyes to how bland their lyrics can be. Really, the only song on here that doesn't suffer from this is Wild Heart. Compared to the rest of the track list, this one sticks out like crazy, but for all the right ways. For starters, its lyrics are actually pretty good. It doesn't use blind, light, or still, and there's some clever lines and word choice. But the instrumentation is super stripped back. Honestly, it's probably the most reminiscent of their old sound. It's got acoustic guitar, upright bass, and honest to God, it's weirdly my favorite song on Delta, you know? Despite loving the crazy instrumentation on all the songs, despite how much I commended the band for evolving their sound, despite not enjoying the album's Wild Heart most closely replicates, it's just so good. The only thing it doesn't have is banjo, and I'm not trying to be petty or funny when I say this, I think that genuinely helps the song. Even though it's used in a lot of creative ways on Delta, it would have rooted this song too much in a folky bluegrass sound, and stopped it from being as eerie and dreary as it is.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
No joke, Wild Heart made me realize how overutilized the banjo was on their early stuff, because if this song is anything to go by, they can get a lot more out of their sound without relying on it 24/7. So in conclusion, Delta is now both my favorite and least favorite album by Mumford & Sons. Again, the instrumentation on this is amazing. I love the direction and creative risk the band took with this, but the lyrics are just so goddamn bland and uninspired, it ruins a good chunk of songs for me. Hell, it's still a problem on songs I love, like Picture You and 42. Once again, I liked about half of it. That may not sound promising, but this thing is over an hour long, so I'll take whatever I can get. But that's enough recollecting. Let's finally talk about their new album, Rushmere.
The stars can keep your secrets. I don't wanna owe them anything.
Okay, enough wasting your time. Now we got 2025's Rushmere. Once again, their first album in over 7 years. We'll talk about why that was in a bit, but for now I'm just gonna rip into this shit. It's boring as hell. So instead of experimenting with different styles or genres like Delta and Wildermind, it just sounds like an even more Diet Coke version of their old shit. Now, to its credit, Rushmere fixes a lot of the instrumentation issues I had with Sigh and Babel. There's way more layering, they use a full drum kit on a lot of the songs, and a significant less amount of banjo. But somehow this thing is still insanely underwhelming. Despite having more instruments, a lot of these songs don't feel as developed as they could be. Surrender has some cool drum beats in the second verse, but it ends way too early. Same thing with Monochrome. I like the chord progression, but it ends before I can get invested in the rest of the song. Also, what the hell is with this effect on the harmonies?
There is life in the ground.
Lots of songs get really boring too. Like the second half drags so hard, I genuinely had trouble focusing on songs like Anchor and Carry On. And it's crazy they feel this way. Most of them are barely 3 minutes. In fact, Rushmere is only 34 minutes long. That's almost half of Delta. And we can discuss how long albums should or shouldn't be all day. And in some ways, that shorter runtime is good. It cuts down a lot of the fat their music used to have. But to me, it cuts off too much. So on top of all of this, a lot of songs feel like they're missing something too. I like the bounciness of Caroline, but the bridge could have had an extra hook to keep me invested. Same thing with Where It Belongs. This one is so boring, I literally wrote in my notes I was falling asleep to it.
When you speak, do you think you could do it kindly?
But the biggest offender out of all of these is the title track. These usually have a decent track record of not being the worst song on their albums, except Wildermind. That one's genuinely great. But that's not the case with Rushmere. It's the epitome of everything wrong with this album. It doesn't evolve their sound, it's got the banjo doing lame shit again, it just feels way too safe.
Light me up, I'm wasted in the dark.
Again, I totally get why fans don't like post-Babel stuff, since it's so far removed from their original sound. But at the very least, they were trying something new instead of rehashing ideas that are over a decade old now. Needless to say, I didn't like this one. On top of being safe, boring, short, it doesn't feel like a cohesive album. The songs don't complement each other or are centered around a unique style. Honestly, this feels like a bunch of songs they had lying around and slapped together as an album, instead of being written as like one big thing. Like none of them even transition into each other. Every single one of their albums before this had at least one, but nope, nothing on Rushmere. I guess the one positive thing I can say is the lyrics aren't as bad as Delta. Like, they're nothing great, but I only counted Blind Lighter Still like once, so credit where it's due. But waiting 7 years for this was extremely disappointing, and I'm sure COVID didn't help with that, but the band also went through a pretty big lineup change during that time that I don't think anyone saw coming. Alright, let's talk about Mumford & Sons' former banjo player, Winston Marshall. Back in 2021, he tweeted about books he read over lockdown, and for a while, it was pretty innocuous. Until he posted about the book Unmasked, Antifa's radical plan to destroy the left, praising it and the author Andy Ngo, a right-wing political journalist who's had a long history of being critical of Antifa and the far left. Unbeknownst to Winston, this single tweet would have massive repercussions. He got thousands of angry responses from fans and non-fans alike, and even from other celebrities and artists too. According to Winston, he was absolutely shocked by this response, as he didn't think the tweet would be so controversial. But if you do any morsel of research on Andy Ngo, you can understand why people would be mad at Winston for endorsing his book. In fact, here's a little highlight reel of why this dude should not be considered a journalist in any way, shape, or form. In April 2017, he was fired from his editorial position for the Portland State University magazine after tweeting an out-of-context clip of a Muslim student speaking at an interfaith panel that completely misrepresented their full response. The newspaper described Ngo's tweet as an oversimplification that violated the ethics of professional journalism and said it also put said Muslim student in significant danger. But instead of taking accountability, Ngo said he was fired for reporting the truth. In October 2018, an activist group called Don't Shoot Portland held a protest after police killed a 27-year-old black man named Patrick Kimmons. And according to his family and other attendees, the protest was peaceful and uneventful, until someone drove their car into a blocked-off area, hitting some of the protesters on a crosswalk. The confrontation was filmed, showing the impact and protesters hitting the car in retaliation. Looks pretty obvious who the agitator was, until an edited version of the video was posted online that took out the driver hitting the protesters, leaving just the section where they retaliated against the driver, giving the illusion the protest wasn't as peaceful as people said it was. And who was responsible for sharing this doctored footage? Why, Andy Ngo, of course. Here's him lying about it on Tucker Carlson.
Demonstrators were allowed to take over a street in downtown Portland and direct traffic and threaten drivers, stop traffic while the police looked on from a block away because they were afraid of inflaming the situation.
Don't believe your lying eyes.
And finally, in June 2019, Andy was covering a rally in Portland by the far-right group Patriot Prayer, as counter-protesters from Antifa showed up. This caused fights to break out between the two groups and led to Andy getting physically assaulted by members of Antifa, and even got a milkshake thrown in his face. And I want to make it clear, I don't condone what happened to Andy or the actions of Antifa, as they're also guilty of inciting violence too. But Andy wasn't as innocent as he made himself out to be, because despite taking a massive stance against political violence following the attack, a video surfaced of him hanging with Patriot Prayer as they were planning to attack members of Antifa at a bar. In fact, after this video dropped, Andy was let go from a right-wing publication he worked at called Quillette. And this is all without mentioning all the bad and factually wrong shit in Unmasked. But suffice to say, I think people had more than enough reasons to be mad at Winston for endorsing Andy. He deleted the tweet a few days later and made an apology saying he came to better understand the pain he caused by endorsing the book, and temporarily stepped away from Mumford & Sons, as they were also getting a lot of shit from this too. Cause this isn't the first time people have questioned the band's politics or who they've affiliated with. During the recording sessions for Delta, they were photographed with Jordan Peterson, obviously another controversial political figure. And they tried defending it by saying, oh, we like having deep philosophical conversations. You know, we don't agree on everything he says. But again, given the shit he says, you can understand why people would be mad. Because one thing I'm sure everyone knows about the band is they've always had a very mixed reputation. You know, they got tons of fans, like I said, I was one of them, but they also got a lot of detractors too that criticized their music, aesthetic, politics, and also accused them of being privileged. Now, while I can't speak for the other members, Winston definitely has some nepo baby-isms. His dad is the co-founder of Marshall Wace, one of the biggest hedge fund managers in the world, and the publisher for The Spectator, a British conservative magazine. Then after a few months, he returned with a massive blog post saying he retracts his original apology and officially announced announced his departure from Mumford & Sons so he no longer had to censor himself. And from this point on, Winston and all his dick suckers downplay the situation so hard. Instead of acknowledging he endorsed a journalist who's lied and fabricated false narratives multiple times, has been caught hanging with far-right groups, and uses his platform to incite violence and harassment against anyone who disagrees with him, now it's just, oh, another poor victim of cancel culture. These damn woke snowflakes went too far again.
And you just ordered a book by a conservative writer. I mean, the fact that that was even a controversy just blows my mind.
It seems absolutely ridiculous now, and it was ridiculous at the time.
Freedom of speech is important. I don't gotta be the billionth person to explain why. But there's also something called consequences, something that goes hand in hand with freedom of speech. So when you support a shitty person without doing a schmither of research, you best believe you're gonna suffer the consequences. Now Winston's whole shtick is being anti-woke and rebelling against cancel culture, going as far as defending other quote-unquote victims of it like J.K. Rowling and Joe Rogan. He's now got a podcast hosted by The Spectator called Marshall Matters, where he talks about political and philosophical issues with other questionable people like Lawrence Fox and Candace Owens. But that's an entirely different rabbit hole to go down, so I'ma call it here. My guess is he's probably never gonna return to Mumford & Sons. Even though they allegedly ended on good terms, I'm sure they don't want to associate with Winston given his recent track record. In fact, that's kind of my tinfoil hat theory for why Rushmere is so safe and boring. They wanted to replicate the style most people know him for before all this shit went down. That's probably not the case, but hey, that's just a theory. But yeah, that's all I got. As usual, thank you all very much for watching. I apologize for delaying this video a couple times. I genuinely wasn't expecting to talk this much about Mumford & Sons. But sometimes that's what life calls for, especially when your banjo player's a dumbass. To be honest, it's kind of sad seeing how much my opinion of him has changed after making this. I'm not gonna stop listening to him completely, cause they still got some good songs. In fact, I'll leave a playlist in the description if you don't believe me. But I doubt I'll ever listen to any of their albums front to back again. It's just not worth my time. Shoutouts to my patrons, of course, and I'll see y'all next time for either a lyrical analysis or something about Spotify bios. Bye!